Okay, so I have gone ahead and restarted the stream, so you should experience just a couple of seconds of downtime here before you start hearing my wonderful, wonderful voice again. And here we are with sort of our second portion of the day, League number 2. We're going to go ahead and rejoin with our good old red-white taxes again. It didn't work out that time, but we'll see how we do this time. We have been paired pretty quickly. Darth Noogies, you say? Darth Noogies plays Eldrazi. This is... I'm on the draw. I am just dead if my opponent uses a Chalice of the Void on me. So I'm going to go ahead and ship this hand. It's kind of weak anyway. This hand is also kind of weak, for being completely honest. My first play is a turn 3 play that isn't particularly relevant against their deck, although Pia and Kieran can buy a lot of time to get me out of it. But I don't have a real 4th land for this, and if I get Thought Knotted, this is still really bad. Ugh. Not good, chat. Not good. I would really like a hand with like a Stoneforge in it. But in case my opponent isn't playing Eldrazi, I should probably just keep this hand. Hey, there's a Stoneforge. Everything got better. Oh, Grim Monolith. My opponent is going to go out of the gates very quickly here. At Basic Plains 13. I don't think so. So the hand was A land, Mom, Vile, Rip, Flicker Wisp, Flicker Wisp. That hand misses against a ton of opponents. That's a very dangerous one. Oh, geez, it's an Oblivion Sower. Alright, we're dead. We're pretty much stone cold dead to this, my own wasteland. My opponent did not wasteland me. That might mean really bad things for me. Well, we'll try to get a Batterskull. Like, if my opponent chooses to not wasteland me, then that might mean that they think that whatever they have going on is just better than what I can do with my mana. And they might be right. Okay, so if my opponent didn't wasteland me last turn and is playing a Thran Dynamo now, not great. We might have something like an Ugin in our future. All right. Our line here is pass the turn. If our opponent essentially has anything else, we're dead. So our current line is play Windswept Heath, pass, fetch a plateau, use Rinwing and Stoneforge as chump blockers to survive, and then hope Pia and Kieran and this Caracas can somehow keep us in the game if our opponent has literally nothing else. I will go ahead and take everything this turn, and then begin chump blocking the following turn. So this puts us to 6, effectively to 5, because we're going to need to fetch. What does this do? When you cast Conduit of Ruin, you may search your library for a colorless creature card with converted mana cost 7 or greater, reveal it, and put it on top. Okay. They're searching for Kozilek, Butcher of Truth. Wonderful. I think I'm okay packing it in here, chat. Yeah, I agree. Pretty much whatever we do is not going to be good enough here. Alright, so we are playing against Big Eldrazi that has artifact-based ramp. So these are the cards here I'm considering. Let's start by cutting this Rest in Peace. It's not good. Doesn't do anything practical in this matchup. These versions of the deck don't tend to have the matter reshapers that the Rest in Peace stops the dies trigger. And that's not really something you want to be doing anyway. And then beyond that, we have to decide what we want to do. The Mirran Crusader is not great, but it's something that can trade with Thought-Knot Seer on its own, and your equipment triggers matter a lot in this matchup. White faces, this is my own red-white build. It is a few cards off from Atai's build. It's sort of a mix of Bahra's and Atai's build. Terminus would be A-okay with me. So then we have to decide what we don't necessarily like in this matchup. All three of the pieces of equipment are relevant. Like Sword of Fire and Ice increases the size of our creatures, so that like Thalia can wall a Thought-Knot Seer, for example. We can go ahead and trim the taxing portion of our deck a little bit. Although it's good against some of their plays like All Is Dust and the Mana Rocks, it's not good against the creatures. And so I think I'm okay with doing that. I'm going to take a quick run over here and see if there's anything else I want to get rid of. While the Revokers aren't necessarily great, they stop the Mana Rocks, and that can be a huge, huge tempo play, especially off of Vial. More or less like everything else, there is a real question of whether or not we want Thalia number 3 or Crusader number 1 here. I think I'm okay with actually Thalia on the play, and then I'll switch to Crusader on the draw. This hand has 2 wastelands, so we're going to keep it. That alone is enough for me to want to keep this hand. We are pretty much going to wasteland our opponent's first 2 lands, no matter what they play. Even if it's something that's not necessarily good, like a Glimmer Post, I will probably just tag it. Oh man, we get another Ancient Tomb. Deal. So Jitte versus Sword of Fire and Ice here is pretty close. I'm going to go ahead and take Sword of Fire and Ice in case my opponent gets a decent-sized body in. I think I want my Batterskull to be able to bash through something like a Thought-Knot Seer. So since we have red now, I'm going to go ahead and play out a fetch intending to get another basic in case we draw a Magus. Alright, there's a Grim Monolith that I am going to revoke given the opportunity. Before that Oblivion Sower trigger goes off, I am going to go ahead and just fetch one more land out of our deck, decrease the chance of them hitting ever so slightly. Alright, we lost a Swords, a Pia and Kieran, and a Flicker Wisp there. That's not the end of the world. The 5/8 body is a little annoying, but our Batterskull is effectively going to wall that. Just drawing a removal spell would be pretty solid here. Caracas is less solid. So Currently, we can get through this Oblivion Sower by putting a sword on the Batterskull and putting a Jitte on the Batterskull. We'll attack in, that hits for 6. We can use the Jitte counters to go ahead and decrease the size of Oblivion Sower and kill it. Although, much preferably, we'd just go ahead and draw a removal spell for it. I don't think our opponent can attack into this unless they have a lot going on. Alright. We don't really need to revoke the Grim Monolith right now. You know, they need to pay 4 mana to untap that. They don't have 4 mana right now. Super punished. Super punished for not revoking. We don't need to start gaining life right now. Like, we're at a healthy 19 life, our opponent can't attack with his Oblivion Sower into our board, or our Crackback is more than what is effectively a greater life change than what they're doing. Like, I know the Oblivion Sower can't kill the germ, but I don't think we need that life. Alright, so our opponent has a lot of mana. A whole lot of mana. So I know I said we were punished for not revoking Monolith, but now that my opponent played double Dynamo, that's not really true anymore. Alright. Removal spell. Thalia. Not irrelevant. So just doing a quick mana count, my opponent has 1, effectively 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, down to 5, up to 9 mana with this Voltaic Key. I more or less have to revoke this Thran Dynamo. I think I'm priced into doing that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Down to 5, 8. My opponent did not block. Huh. Well. That is interesting. Why didn't my opponent block? What were they playing around? Did they just look at their 5 power and think they had 5 toughness and they were going to die? Because if my opponent wasn't going to block, then equipping the sword absolutely was the better play. Double gut shot. Yes, playing around double gut shot that I clearly bordered around. Ooh, Vampire Zeal. That's a good one. So if my opponent does something like All is Dust, the Revoker will be around to pick up the equipment afterwards. There's an Endbringer. That's annoying. Okay. Would still love to draw one of those 7 removal spells that are in my deck that cost 1 mana. Whew! Alright. Just doing a quick thought to myself to make sure there's no colorless counterspell that can just tag this Jitte if I hardcast it. I don't think there is. Yeah, white faces, you're right. Forgot to play my Rashad Port there. Small punt. Man, the best thing my opponent has to do to start off their turn is Thought Knot me. That's great. My opponent has chosen not to search for a creature card with their Conduit of Ruin. Interesting. Why would they not search with Conduit of Ruin? Do they just have, like, double fatty in hand? and they don't want to just draw something like in a... that's interesting. Yeah, so their hand is probably like Kozilek Olamog or equivalent. Opponent not going for the double block here. So our board is amazing, but if our opponent has, like, how does our opponent win if we cast this Cataclysm? Because, like, we'll get to Cataclysm and then Port afterwards. So if we do this, we can keep Phyrexian Revoker and Umezawa's Jitte, and then the Jitte can pump Phyrexian Revoker twice on the following turn in order to beat through the Thought-Knot Seer that's on board. So we're doing it. Oh shoot, no, we select this as the creature. Never mind. So we select that as the creature, we select this as the artifact, we select this as the land. Done. Like if they have two fatties in hand, then like what can they do to win? Tipsy lol, our opponent gets to see what we pick first. Our opponent is very likely to name our Rashadan ports here and shut off both ports. I think they have to name the ports to have any shot at winning this game. So what's interesting is that since our opponent went down to one card in this previous turn, that means that they did not have double, like, 10 plus drops in their hand. They had, like, potentially, like, a land that they were holding plus something big. Like, there was only one card that we never saw in that match. So then the question is, why did they not tutor with their Conduit of Ruin? And that's something I'm a little bit unsure about. And another eye. Yeah. Like, another legendary land. That makes sense. Alright, so we're on the play. We win by some combination of equipment and Cataclysm. Either one would have done the job pretty easily. So on the draw, I'm fine with subbing one Thalia for a Crusader. Otherwise, I like what we did. This hand has a Wasteland, which is one of our best cards in the matchup. The Stoneforge and Aether Vial side of this, as well as the Mirran Crusader, will be good against the regular-sized Eldrazi threats. It's the real big stuff that we'll have to worry about. This hand is fine. A Port or another Wasteland or a Magus or anything of that nature would be a very good draw. So the question is, do we want to just wasteland the Cloud Post, or do we want to start by playing our Aether Vial early and then try to tag a land that is worth 2? In my experience, it's better to just aggressively go after the mana right away from the start, because like you never know what can happen in these big fast mana decks, like the Grim Monoliths and Sorcerous Spyglasses and things that they can do on early mana does really matter. And plus, if my opponent plays another post, the card has a lot of value. Yeah, my opponent isn't going to do anything with just their 1 mana here, so that feels pretty strong. We now get to deploy our Aether Vial, and we have Stoneforge, Port, Swords to Plowshares as follow-up plays next turn. Alright, there's a Sorcerous Spyglass that will most certainly go after our Aether Vial. I guess there is a non-zero chance that they will pick Rashadan Port. sort of depends on how much mana they have in their deck. If they're a little constrained, they'll pick Port. They might pick Port anyway, but Vial's really good too. It's going to be a tough choice for my opponent. Alright, they have chosen to pick Aether Vial. I mean, Whiteface is also weird was my opponent not blocking with their, oh gosh, with their 5/8 creature when my 6/6 Batterskull attacked in. That was also weird. So I can play a Stoneforge and get the pressure on, or I can port my opponent and plan on cataclysming a few of their lands away. Since I have 2 more land drops in hand, I sort of like playing patiently here. I don't think I'm in a particular hurry. Like, if I Stoneforge and my opponent has a Thought-Knot Seer that they deploy, it'll invalidate my Batterskull or whatever else I get. Alright. We now have a follow-up Cataclysm as well. Isn't that nifty? Having the city feels pretty good because if my opponent makes another land drop, they have to sacrifice the city, and if they don't make another, yep, there we go. All right, there's a Thran Dynamo. All right, so we have choices. If we cast this Cataclysm here, my opponent will keep Thran Dynamo and a Soul Land in all likelihood, leaving them with 5 mana to our 1 mana. But if they get rid of that, that means we can put this Mirror Crusader in. We have a Swords to Plowshares as an answer to most of the things that they can play. If I just port them and I port the Ancient Tomb, then they have 3, 4, 5, 6, potentially more mana, and they can stick some big card like, say, an Oblivion Sower. We can try to ride this Cataclysm out for a little bit more value. Doing so is a touch risky. So, like, if I play a Stoneforge this turn, tutor up a Batterskull, I can keep the Stoneforge and plan on putting in the Batterskull as my way to finish things off. But if my opponent has a big 6-drop, it's awkward. Like, my opponent playing the Thran Dynamo there changes the evaluation of the Cataclysm quite a bit. think I want to play the Stoneforge. If I play this Stoneforge, port them, they play one thing, I can Cataclysm and then Swords their one thing. I think I've talked myself into that. And I'm going to port the Ancient Tomb over the Eldrazi Temple out of fear of my opponent using the generic mana for multiple things. Alright, Warping Wail on the Stoneforge. Warping Wail just counters a sorcery, right? Okay, so if we would have jammed the Cataclysm, it would have gotten Warping Wailed. So our line worked out very well, although that was not something that was on my radar to play around. Like, I know it's in the deck, but since I'm not usually casting sorceries, that's not something that I think about. Alright, my opponent gets a port out of this, and my plateau. Alright, they port my port, which is a good play rather than porting a white source, because if they port a white source, I can just Swords the Oblivion Sower right away. Yep. We're going to temporarily say always no to this. Alright, so we cast the Cataclysm. We will go ahead and keep our plateau. Yes, it's a non-basic, but I'm not too worried about our opponent getting another Wasteland off of an Oblivion Sower. I might need to take this Vial up to 4 and cast my Magus. Ooh, my opponent has opted to take their Sorceress Spyglass over their Thran Dynamo. Interesting. That might mean that they have a handful of lands still. Or that they're just trying to ride this Oblivion Sower, thinking they can't win the game otherwise. This one could get pretty close. If my opponent keeps drawing mana and then has a big follow-up play, it could get tricky. Alright, so my opponent has ramped themselves 1 mana. What do we see here? An Oblivion Sower. A Schadenport. Slightly scary, but not the end of the world. So while I have the ability to play a 3-drop, I'm going to go ahead and cast the Crusader, and then I will remove this Oblivion Sower on the following turn. So we have the follow-up play of Swords to Plowshares, Oblivion Sower, attack in with Mirror and Crusader. That'll put my opponent to 26, and we'll have him dead in 2 turns with Mirror and Crusader. So for those of you not used to playing with Mirror Crusader, since it has double strike with Jitte, it's pretty dumb. So we can pump it for 8, which puts Mirror Crusader up to a 10-10, and that means that it on its own with Jitte is a 2-turn clock. Alright, well there goes Mirror Crusader, but that's okay. There are lots of good cards that I can get here. I can get Palace Jailer as a safety net against any creature, but I'm just going to go ahead and get Magus of the Moon here. We'll turn whatever remaining lands my opponent has into mountains, and then finish up the game. Alright, so this is actually interesting. So my opponent has 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 mana, so they can activate Eye of Ugin. If I Magus of the Moon, they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 mana, so they can still cast something that's big. Alternatively, I can just Cataclysm again and prevent them from doing anything, which is what I will go ahead and do. Ooh, my opponent has a heads-up play of porting one of my lands mid-turn. That's actually very good. It's actually very, very good. I didn't think my opponent was going to do that since they didn't bother to do it in my upkeep. It's inconvenient. Get got is correct, Nick. So now we have to play this Magus, but it might backfire on us on a number of different levels. But we kind of have to put the impetus on my opponent to act here. So that's 11 mana. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That doesn't get them there as of right now. Or no, Thraben Dynamo. Yep, okay. That's rough. So I can kill my own Magus here to give me the out of drawing a removal spell. Or I can just try to race my opponent after they attack in. So that would be 8, 9 damage presenting. I have 2 minutes on the clock. I'm going to try to draw a removal spell. Phyrexian Revoker, you are a little bit late to the party. So since I only have 9 cards left in library, I don't really need to block here. That thing will kill me on the following turn, pretty much no matter what. Sure. So that should eliminate all of our outs here. Alright. So, a lot of things went weird that game. My opponent took some poor lines that resulted in them probably losing, oh, I don't know, an extra 6 life in game 2, and potentially taking them off of some outs. And then in game 3, they missed an obvious port time. And so then I thought the attack was safe when I really should have just cataclysmed them just in case they figured out the port line. If I cataclysmed that second time, then I don't think they could have possibly come back from that, even if I just poked them to death with the 1/1. So our opponent beat us through a cataclysm. Ported at a weird time. There were opportunities where we and they could have done a lot of things differently that game. The cataclysms were a little awkward. Both games, and that's the sort of card that Cataclysm always is. It will frequently win you the game, but it is not a guarantee. It's sort of a weird card in that respect. All right, I'm going to take about 30 seconds to run to the restroom here. That was a pretty long and drawn-out game, and then I'll get started with my next match. All right, not starting off this league strong, but that's okay. Yeah, all of that could have been avoided if I just played that Cataclysm prior to combat. I was just absolutely convinced that my opponent wasn't going to port me if they didn't do it in the upkeep when it was optimal. What do I think about Pontiff in the sideboard? Pontiff is a great sideboard card. I would say at an absolute minimum, you would want to have 3 sources that can cast it along with the Ether Vial. On my website, under one of the splashing pages, I have an article about sort of the math of splashing and how many sources you need to cast that guy on time. But more on that later. Alright, I'm currently playing against Lucky Dragon. No results for this player, so we will just kind of keep as we normally do based on a blind opponent. Lucky Dragon. This hand is fine. It is a little action light, but we have Wasteland, Vile, a turn 1 disruption spell for a creature, and a relevant card for the combo matchups. Alright, our opponent thought seizes us. Well, the good news is that if my opponent has a bunch of counterspells, they're not going to do much this game. Bad news is I'm not providing any pressure, and I'm really land heavy here. So given a lack of information about what my opponent is doing, they could be on any number of decks. It's my plan to wasteland them. I'm going to go ahead and play this Rest in Peace first. My opponent is some sort of mid-rangey deck. Oh, no. It just resolved. And then in my opponent's upkeep, I will wasteland them to just play around Stifle a little bit. If they cast something in their end step, I might bite and wasteland then. Abrupt Decay on the Vile on 2. They're buying themselves a little bit of time here. I will go ahead and take this time to blow up their Tropical Island, as to not give them another chance to cast an Abrupt Decay in their upkeep. And I'll just tap the Vile as well, see if they have a Stifle, but I don't think they do. Will not use Aether Vile's ability. I'm watching the stream on my end, and everything looks okay. Just gonna push with Thalia. Yep. I will go ahead and vial this in their upkeep. No need to let them use their mana on removal spells earlier than I need to let them. It's going to be a really rough call against command on any number of levels. Just a lightning bolt. That's okay. So for now, we'll say always no to this. Alright, we're going the slow way this time. Not the most exciting match of Magic here, but hopefully I start doing things. Alright, there's a Jace. Stoneforge Mystic is a fine draw. So our opponent is auto-yielding, meaning that they don't have a counterspell in hand. So I'm going to go ahead and get Sword of Fire and Ice. Under normal circumstances, if my opponent wasn't auto-yielding, I would just hold this and cast it the next turn. But since they're auto-yielding, I will just do this. No need to attack the Jace here. We've got the Jace more or less in check with this Stoneforge and the Sword of Fire and Ice. Toxic Deluge is rough. So this Rest in Peace is probably pretty good. It's probably blanking opposing Deathrights and Snapcaster Mages. But we need something pretty quickly before this Jace just drowns us in card advantage. This is going to be a Coliseum's Command blowing up the sword and making us discard in all likelihood. Yep. There's a good chance that we don't come out of this one now, but we have a bunch of live draws. Pia and Kieran in particular would be gas. Because we can cast it uncounterable and hold Caracas up as protection for it as well. Our opponent probably couldn't beat a P and K. Oh gosh. Oh wait, no, it doesn't matter right now. Right now it is just a 3-4. That's fine. The Rest in Peace has done a ton of work here. Alright, so we can now limit my opponent's red mana usage quite a bit. We'll tap this Volcanic Island. We'll let them go to combat, and then when they do, we will bounce this Kess, and they will be sad. Alright, they have gone into Fate Seal mode. Alright, so the next time my opponent leaves a card on top with Jace, I can shuffle it away with this Flooded Strand. Alright, they put it on the bottom, so we won't shuffle. I accept your Hinda Turok for my bonus Caracas. I already have red for P and K, so I don't need to. It's not a great draw at this point. It's not a terrible draw, but it's not what I need. I need like a Recruiter or a P and K to get me out of this bind. Revoker would be fine, although my opponent probably has a fistful of removal spells. I very much doubt this mom is going to make it to my turn even. Swords to Plowshares is not great. I'm actually not even going to just cast the Swords of Plowshares on either one of these creatures. This Jace is going to kill me before the Deathrite or the Baleful Strix will. So I'd rather have my opponent think that I have something. Let's just see what my opponent left on top. Alright. Well, if they left that on top, they have a counterspell for it. And we're dead. Alright, so we are playing against Checkpile, a grindy 4-color control deck. So we are going to board in sort of the top end of our cards. We're going to board in a bunch of heavy hitters like Cataclysm and P and K in order to try to beat our opponent. The first thing we're going to do is start by trimming our Swords to Plowshares. They are not particularly good here. Your opponent has things like Deathrite Shaman that are worth a card, but I'm going to try to just clean Deathrite Shaman up with Rest in Peace rather than use a 1-for-1 removal spell on it. Next, I'm going to cut my Palace Jailer. There are some people who really, really like this card in this matchup, in that you can become the Monarch and sorry, I lost my train of thought there. I'm boarding out Palace Jailer because if my opponent ever becomes the Monarch with something like an end-of-turn Snapcaster Mage, I am just going to get buried in card advantage and die. I think Palace Jailer is a very, very scary card to play. Like, when you're already ahead a little bit, it can be amazing, but when like you're behind on board, your opponent goes like removal spell plus Snapcaster Mage or something like that, you can just die and lose the game instantly, and so I don't think I want to live that life. Next, I need to trim some number of other cards. This is a little different from the build that I normally play with, so bear with me as I figure out what I want to do for my last 2 cuts. Getting the timing right on a Flicker Wisp can be pretty difficult in this matchup, and your opponent doesn't have a lot of things that you want to flicker, so that might actually be my cut. Revoker is another reasonable cut. I'd say it's between Revoker and Flicker Wisp as to what you want to cut. Revoker shuts off Jace, which is their endgame engine, while also shutting off Deathrite Shaman in the short term. Flicker Wisp can be hard to use in this matchup because of the vials, and it gets sort of stonewalled by Baleful Strix. What's awkward about Revoker is that it is an artifact, so it plus another one of your creatures can die to a single Culligan's command. I think I want at least 1 Revoker in the deck. I'll submit like this on the play. I might switch when I'm on the draw. Yes, we saw green. We saw an Abrupt Decay. I will go ahead and keep this hand. It is not the strongest hand in the world, but we have Cavernous Souls, one of the better cards in the matchup, and a Mother of Runes, which is a must-answer turn 1 play. We have a Revoker or a Jitte as a follow-up, and 2 strong 3-drop plays for if we draw another land. Alright, so our mom lives. That's good news for us. Since we have this Magus as a follow-up next turn, I'm going to go ahead and just name Deathrite Shaman here. Alright, your Pithing Needle resolves on my Mother of Runes. Ooh, Wasteland. They're scared of mana denial. Hey, you know, if they're scared of mana denial, boy does this suck. Now, unless my opponent has basics in hand, they are in pretty rough shape. Seeing as my opponent Pithing Needled Wasteland when I don't have one showing, yep. There we go. Game 1 result. Loss. We are on the play for this one, and we win. So just updating my notes. So game 1, we lost to Jace. Game 2, win with Magus on turn 3. We'll be on the draw for this next game. The Flicker Wisp versus Revoker Call is pretty close. I think I'm gonna. I think I'll go ahead and stick with the Revokers. Yeah, so this is one of the big advantages of the red-white build. Sometimes you just get absolutely free wins like that. Like, that is just a non-game. You know, that's the same as you just, like, casting a show and tell, and then your opponent dies. That's what happened. I will be keeping this hand. It is a little weak, but it has an Ether Vial, and most Ether Vial hands are just keeps, generically speaking. If you have 2 lands and Ether Vial, you know, that is a great start to a hand. I'm going to wait on playing this fetch for as long as possible to see if I need to get a red source with it. Yeah, Goblin Lackey, it feels real good. Like, it's just a freebie. Alright, so do I want to deploy the Stoneforge or do I want to port? It is a real question. If I don't port, my opponent can play an annoying 3-drop, which could be anything ranging from Leovold to a Planeswalker here. I think I like dragging the game on since I have the Pia and Kieran and Caracas combo already. So rather than get aggressive with my opponent, I'm going to slow the game down and port them. And I'm going to choose to port them off of black so that we don't get a hand disruption spell thrown at us. So again, lots of options for this turn. If I continue on the mana denial plan and I port my opponent and they do something like Colligan's command my Ether Vial, then in response I get to Stoneforge, search up an equipment, and do something like Cheetah Batterskull into play, which would be pretty okay. Alternatively, I can cast a Recruiter of the Guard, go get a Thalia, and Violent Athalia to start on the mana denial plan. But I sort of like intending to use this Revoker to get a Magus of the Moon. I think that's my long-term plan for that card. You got it, opponent. You can brainstorm. So now I have to decide whether I want to cut my opponent off red or cut my opponent off of double black. While a hymn is annoying, is it the end of the world? Most of my hand is gas right now. I think I'm going to keep him off of red. here's probably the Culligan's command. Use this ability. Get a Stoneforge Mystic. Always yield to Stoneforge. Use its ability. Yes. And we can select Batterskull for a huge amount of pressure or Sword of Fire and Ice for the protection. I'll get Sword of Fire and Ice, since the Baleful Strix is already in play. And I think I'll go ahead and discard the Revoker. And on my turn, I will... Or excuse me, the Recruiter. And then on my turn, or maybe just Recruitering for Magus is good, but I don't have the mana to do it. I'll get rid of the Jete. Deathrite. Yep. I die a little inside every time I see a K command kill an Aether Vial. Yeah, it stings. Like, our Aether Vial was going to be really, really good this time around. So this is sort of the point where my opponent is going to be able to break free from the mana denial aspect of my deck. And so I have to decide what I want to do about that. I can Flicker Wisp for Stoneforge to just get another card and play a slightly longer attrition game, which might be fine. I can Revoker to shut off the Deathrite. I think I'm going to go with the Flicker Wisp line. Like there are a ton of lines available. Like long term, I just want to start bouncing this P and K. I don't want to play the Revoker on Deathrite in case my opponent has a Jace, because that's something I care about much more. And we will get Plateau because we have P and K in hand. Him, the Turek, got the P and K and the Recruiter to get the next P and K, but left us with 2 pieces of equipment. So that's not the end of the world. Snap him would be rough. Liliana of the Veil. Alright. So I'm going to go ahead and sacrifice the Flicker Wisp since we don't have any spot removal to get rid of the Baleful Strix. We're going to need to push through with equipment. The Stoneforge will let us produce another body, followed by Yeah, this is great, actually. So we can cast this Revoker. We'll put it on Lily. Out of the Veil. We can then put in one of our 2 pieces of equipment this turn, and the other one the following turn. A Snapcaster K command, or equivalent, will wreck us pretty bad. Thoughtseize me. Annoying. The Batterskull is a big body that is a little... that will just trade with the Baleful Strix, though. So I'm going to go ahead and put in my sword. And then they will take my Batterskull. The sword has the possibility of drawing me cards while also shooting Liliana. I don't have mana to re-equip the Batterskull yet, and the Batterskull's really bad if they have a K command. Goblin Lackey, I'm really glad you did not predict the future there. Snap him would have been rough. Although if they had a Snapcaster Mage, honestly, I think they'd just hold it and Snapcaster Kolaghan's command. Like, get rid of one of my pieces of equipment and my Phyrexian Revoker, plus get another card out of my hand. So that's all 3 of my pieces of equipment now. Jitte's in the yard, Batterskull's in the yard, Sword is in play. So we're going to be putting our opponent to the test to have removal every turn, otherwise our sword gets out of control. I don't like them producing mana here. That can't be good for us. That's the Snapcaster Kolaghan's command. That gets the Revoker and the sword. Wow, they did not take the sword off of the board. We drew a land, so they didn't get punished for it. But that's a relatively greedy play. Like I don't think they care about me just having a 1/2 in play. I get to attack my opponent's mana a bit, but it's sort of awkward in the face of this Deathrite Shaman. We can't actually keep them off of any color other than green. So I guess we will go ahead and wasteland that and then port them off of a mana source, but we're not in great shape now. I mean, I am lucky he doesn't understand the matchup. Yeah, sure, that's true, but he's still pretty ahead on board. And we're going to port the Volcanic here so they can't just use it to just Deathrite Drain me. Pretty much right now, all I need to do is draw 2 creatures in a row and have my opponent's top card not be a removal spell, and then all of a sudden I'm back in this game. Yeah, he absolutely had the win. I agree with that. Leaving this sword on the board is very, very dangerous. Or wait, I guess it doesn't particularly matter which one I port now. I guess I will just port a blue source for multiple cantrip reasons. Ugh. Ugh. Alright, so we lost game 3 there. So game 3, opponent misplayed with the K command, but didn't get punished. Alright, Chad, I've lost like 4 games in a row now. This is rough. 5 games in a row. Jeez. Has not been a profitable day for my ticket count. Like, there really aren't that many K commands. Like, K command is in check pile as, you know, multiple copies of it. You might see one in Grixis Delver from time to time. You might see one in Grixis Control and other similar decks from time to time. But it's not like the meta is just K command all the time. Alright. We're playing against Chicken Dude PWNZ Pones. My opponent's deck is listed as just B. So my opponent plays Metalworker. So, like, my opponent plays Mud and Eldrazi, it looks like, and Big Eldrazi. So if my opponent is on some sort of Eldrazi deck and I get to Magus them, that seems good. So I'm on the play. I will keep this. So we will go ahead and deny our opponent some permanent mana. Neat. I'm not going to violate this Mother of Runes. If my opponent would like to take this Mother of Runes instead of any of the good cards in my hand, they are more than welcome to do so. Opponent has opted to take the Thalia. My opponent is on a colorless deck of some variety. Mom doesn't need to be held back here. We'll go ahead and get Batterskull with this first one. It's a lot of pressure if we draw a land. And we draw a land. So we'll put this Magus into play. Attack the Mom. And then my opponent has one mountain in play relevantly. Yes, Mom is eager cadet right now. Just absolutely getting in there. Alright. Well, take key is a pretty good draw for my opponent. That means with the monolith, they actually have access to colorless mana. But they are facing down a very swift clock. So I have 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 damage on board. Alright, so that hand was pretty ideal. I'm going to guess that our opponent is on Big Eldrazi rather than just a generic Metalworker deck based on what I've seen so far. So this one we're going to play or draw. I think we're going to play. Yep. Alright, so we were on the play, and we win versus Chicken Dude Phones. Game 1. We win with Magus, essentially. Let's start sideboarding. Alright, so we'll more or less sideboard the same way we did before. We'll bring in the Paths, bring in these Cataclysms, we'll bring in Relic Order, and I think we brought in Crusader too. We'll start by getting rid of Mom, and Rest in Peace. And then what else did we do before? I think I trimmed some of this type of stuff. I think I trimmed a Thalia and a Wingmare. Stormy, it's also pretty fringe in American paper as well. Like, I think I've maybe played against Big Eldrazi maybe once or twice on paper, but I play against it every couple of days online. I think I've played against it like twice today as well. Yeah, so I think when I'm on the draw, we can trim the number of Thalias we have, because it's not going to come in under their mana rocks, in all likelihood. It's also possible I should bring in this second P and K, just as endgame inevitability, multiple chump blockers for some of their big stuff. But I think I'll leave it as 1 for right now. This hand's great. We have 2 Wastelands and a Rishadan Port, as well as an Aether Vial. Sorcerer Spyglass on Wasteland is rough. And went from being amazing to being very mediocre quickly. Like, we still have Port and Aether Vial as a decent combo, but wastelanding my opponent's first two lands was going to probably be pretty close to game winning. Alright, my opponent has some big mana coming. This would be a great time to just slam our good friend Magus here, I suppose. So if we Magus, we make our opponent only have 3 mana, which is way better than what we're looking at right now. You know, all it takes, though, is my opponent to just have, like, a mana rock that they can start untapping with Voltaic Key, like so, and things will get dangerous. Alright. That's decent. We'll name ThrabenU there. We'll play a backup Aether Vial. And now the question is, do I want to use the Flicker Wisp at my end step to just deny another mana? So I can go ahead and just like flicker out a Cloud Post and then leave my opponent at 3 mana for this turn instead of 4. Or I can leave the Flicker Wisp up to protect a Revoker from Warping Whale. Actually, my opponent can't Warping Whale right now because they don't have Colorless, so I will use it to deny a mana. So we'll temporarily say always no to this one. This puts my opponent to 7, so I can either Thalia or Batterskull here. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I already have lethal on board, so I will just Thalia. The Batterskull can be the follow-up if they have something like All is Dust. Dynamo is revoked currently. Alright, we got there with Magus once again. On the draw, we win. We got game 2 with Magus. Alright, back in we go. 1-2 in this league. Have some recovering to do. I am not going to stop being a bully with white creatures. That's basically the only thing I do. Although technically, I was a bully with a red creature at that last match. They're playing against Deus Faith. Our opponent seems to think pretty highly of herself, question mark. Deus is the Latin word for God. No data on our opponent. We will keep this hand, though. It is very reasonable, especially on the play. It has a good variety of tools for various matchups. We're on play versus Deus Faith. Since we have such an aggressive curve of Thalia into Magus, I'm going to go ahead and fetch with this Windswept Heath on my main phase in order to play around Stifle. Like, there's a very small percentage chance that my opponent both is playing Stifle and holds it up, but I just 100% want to be able to cast 2-drop into 3-drop with this hand. Yeah, Bentley, it's been a while that I've seen you. You should come out sometime and jam some games with us. We haven't been so good about going to the Thursday Legacies as of late, since they're no longer EE satellite qualifiers. Our motivation to go out decreased a lot, and since I bought into Moto, I can just sit here at home in my pajamas and jam games rather than putting on pants and going to Star City. So, deal breaker sometimes. Hey, I'm really glad to hear that that helped. 7-3 is a really good finish at a tournament of that size. You know, you're going to be playing against some really good players in the later rounds. It's very possible my opponent is just going to be on some sort of combo deck since they took so long mulliganing their hand, or like deciding whether or not they wanted to mulligan. So we might just like die right here. But I'm still going to play around the Stifle. Like, if my opponent is like an Ant deck, for example, and they have a Cabal Therapy, seeing Windswept Heath, they're pretty likely to just like name Thalia anyway. That's an Eldrazi Mimic. That's a Swords to Plowshares, friend. It's fine. Modern's an okay format. A lot of people really like Modern. It's not necessarily for me. Death and Taxes isn't good there. Stoneforge is banned. So if I draw another land, I'm very likely to just wasteland my opponent. But if I don't draw a land, I might just jam Thalia and then follow up with Magus of the Moon. It's a tricky spot. If my opponent just thought not away this Magus, I'm really sad. But otherwise, the Magus on the following turn is really, really good. So how many lands do I have left in the deck? I've effectively drawn 4, so I'm at 20 lands left in deck, 57 cards left, sub 50% to draw a land. Don't want to get the Magus Thought Knotted. I will still waste them. Like, if they stumble on mana, that is great for me. I mean, if I were gonna Bentley, if I was gonna guess what you're playing, I'd guess that you were playing the blue-red Storm deck. Alright, we are pretty likely to just win this game next turn with this Magus of the Moon now. We'll have Swords to Plowshares for a follow-up for any creature that slips through. Yeah, that's sort of my philosophy too. If I can just jam Death and Taxes or an equivalent in a format, I will do so. You know, like I usually play Shops in Vintage. I played a lot of Death and Taxes in Modern. It's what I know. The skills carry over. Although I miss the days of Splinter Twin being legal in Modern. That was the most fun I ever had playing Modern. That card was great. That deck was great. The format was super interesting around it. But I understand why it got banned. So be it. I wonder if my opponent is just like a new to Moto player. They're navigating this game very slowly, and I don't think there's a lot to think about. Like this Mom and this Thalia are not cards that they care about. So like, all right, my opponent just concedes. They have given up. They're probably out of lands. So I saw Eldrazi Mimic, so I am going to board for regular Eldrazi rather than big Eldrazi. So we'll start by removing Mom and Rest in Peace. We can bring in this Relic Warder, this Mirren Crusader, these Cataclysms, and these two cards are maybes. What else do I want to cut from this? So, like, there are cards that are kind of so-so. Like, Thalia is not great. I usually like to trim one or two. Wingmare is kind of okay, similarly. But most of the rest of the stuff in the deck is fine. Like, the equipment side of our deck is good. The Flicker Wisps stop endless ones. The Recruiters get Palace Jailer or Pia and Kieran. I really like Pia and Kieran because it buys a ton of time. So I think I want to put that in. The Cunning Spark Mage kills Eldrazi Mimics and sometimes can be nice with first strike damage, but it's sort of anemic. And Cataclysm can be okay if they're on a board of just mana, but it's not so good when they have a creature, since a lot of their creatures are bigger than yours. So I will just go ahead and trim one Thalia here and submit this. Normal Eldrazi can sometimes play Cloudpost. That is a good point. Like, should I just hedge and board in these Cataclysms anyway? Okay, I'll hedge. So I'll pull another Thalia and Against the big Eldrazi, I let the second Pia and Kieran in the board, I think. No, I like that just fine. We saw Eldrazi Mimic though. Like the big builds aren't playing Eldrazi Mimic. I'll leave the Cataclysms in the side and see if I regret that decision. Justin, we have so this hand is fine. Like I have a removal spell and a Stoneforge for Batterskull and P&K as endgame. You don't need Imperial Recruiter because Recruiter of the Guard actually gets Flicker Wisp since it checks toughness rather than power. So that's actually really good for us. It's actually just better than Imperial Recruiter. All right, so our opponent took a mulligan to 6 on the play. Goblin Lackey, would you bring the Clasms against regular Eldrazi, assuming this is regular Eldrazi, or just big Eldrazi? While my opponent is moving kind of slowly here, I just want to say thank you all to turning into the stream. If you haven't followed already and you're interested in seeing more Death and Taxes and good Legacy play, feel free to follow the channel to get alerts when I go live. I would appreciate it. I'm trying to grow the channel and become a partner. All right. Alright, my opponent has a Chalice of the Void. Hey, Boxall. Thought I modded you before. I should mod you. Well, you are a mod, you just don't have a funny thing next to your name. So I can just Stoneforge for Batterskull here, or I can continue to port my opponent and hope that they're land light. I'd kind of like to keep my opponent off of casting some big idiot. My opponent took a mulligan. They'd have to have another soul land in order to play something like a Thought-Knots here. So I like just biding my time here and porting them. Like if I just cast the Stoneforge and then my opponent has a Thought-Knot, I lose the Batterskull, and the Jitte isn't going to do quite what I want it to do on the current board, since I can't just Swords to Plowshares away this Chalice. Or whatever creature my opponent would play, sorry. So I'd like to draw Wasteland. That would be one of my best draws. Alright, my opponent has a soul land. So they have the option to play a Thought Knot and get this Stone Forge. But this is just going to be a Reality Smasher, it looks like. Chalice on 2. Aggressive. Now I'm starting to like Cavern of Souls as a draw. Or a Flicker Wisp would be great. Well, now we're sort of locked into the continue to port my opponent plan because they shut off most of my hand here. I will play the Windswept Heath though, so that if we draw another red source, we can play P and K. Alright, game on. We'll see if my opponent can do something big and terrible to us with their mana. This is the first time they've had just fully unchecked mana. Oblivion Sower gets a Wasteland. So my opponent didn't Wasteland us, so they might need that Wasteland. I would like to sandbag this Caracas to like bounce the P and K on their turn, but I don't think that's going to happen. Like if I pass the turn without doing anything else, then they'll Wasteland this. So I'm going to go ahead and just bounce P and K. I'll get 2 more Thopters. I can just keep taking the 4 from the Endless One and jump block the Oblivion Sower for a few turns and see where that puts us. Yeah, Goblin Laggy, stealing the waste is rough. I think it's very, very poor of them to not kill the Caracas here. I don't think they realize how good this is going to be. So we're hoping to draw a Flicker Wisp to get one of these chalices off the board, and then we can... what do you have going on? Another Oblivion Sower? A Reality Smasher. Reality Smasher is very good against our board. I can jump here, take 5, plan on bouncing the PNK the following turn if I don't have anything else to do. Hey, that probably is enough to just win us this game. More Flicker Wisps, please. So we Flicker Wisp, we'll get rid of the Chalice on 1. Path to exile this Reality Smasher. Discard a Jitte. We can't force that through with Cavern of Souls. We'll have the Swords to Plowshares for either one of these creatures my opponent decides to attack with. So I think I'm fine with hitting my opponent for 4 here. And taking 4 from the Endless one. Another Reality Smasher would be pretty brutal. Oh, they just cast a Warping Wheel that gets countered by their own Chalice. That's great for us. Thought-Knot Seer, you say? So I don't actually care about any of the cards in my hand. Oddly enough, since they're all 2-drops, none of them matter. The only thing I care about is his Swords to Plowshares. If I draw anything relevant off the Thought-Knot trigger, the Thought-Knot just takes it. So I'm actually just going to Swords the Oblivion Sower. It's the only body that my stuff that's on board can't potentially trade with. Yeah, my opponent is probably not used to casting a Chalice on 2. Their hand was sort of really awkward at the beginning. And they're down to not very much gas right now. So our plan for the following turn is to go ahead and block the Thought-Knot Seer, trade with the Thought-Knot Seer, block with P and K, bounce it. The question is, do I want to leave the Flicker Wisp back, or do I want to just attack with the Flicker Wisp? I don't think I want to attack with anything. Like, I could attack with 1 Thopter, but the 1 point of damage probably doesn't matter very much. So I will just pass the turn and let my opponent attack into me. Opponent probably staring at Eldrazi Mimic in hand. You're probably not wrong, honestly. Alright, so my opponent goes and attacks in with both of these. Unfortunately, I can't trade with two of these. So what I'm going to do is... I guess I could fling something with P and K. Let me think that out. Yeah. So I can block Flicker Wisp here, block Thopter here, fling Thopter at Thoughtnot, and still trade two bodies for it, but sort of save myself some extra points of damage, and then I can P and K bounce the following turn for an additional block. And now we have the Cavern for P and K. Hey, you remember a billion turns ago when our opponent wastelanded a red source instead of the Caracas, and I said that was a bad play? There we go. Yeah, Agate, you came up with the same line I ended up taking there. So if I put this on Artificer, I can actually cast my Stoneforge as well, and I still have equipment in my deck, so I will do that. Oh, geez. My opponent got 3 hits there. The port is a little bit annoying, as is the Cavern of Souls. I don't know if my opponent will realize this, but with the Cavern of Souls, if they have a 2-drop, they can cast it through the Chalice. So my Jitte is in exile, but the rest of the equipment is still in deck. So you tap a plateau here. I don't think I want to do anything with that plateau, so that's fine. Magus of the Moon. Is that good for me, or is that bad for me? Well, it doesn't matter, I can't cast it this turn, because this is on Artificer. The big ol' 5/8's gonna get us? Maybe. I'm gonna go ahead and take the Batter Skull. We're pretty close to stabilizing as is, so if we can start gaining some life with like a Thopter equipped Batter Skull attacking every turn, that should close the door on this game. The sword drawing cards would be fine as well. I could push a little bit of damage here by attacking with some Thopters, but I'd rather have extra chump blockers back for if my opponent goes and does something like plays a Reality Smasher. My life total is in precarious condition. We are going to tap my opponent's Rishadan-port here. Alright. Yeah, that's fine. So what's the plan on my turn? The plan on my turn is Stoneforge in Stoneforge in the Batterskull, and then I have 4 mana remaining beyond that. Since I have this second P and K in my hand, I think I'm okay with just trading this body away to get this off the board. So now on my turn, I can play the second P and K and put the Batterskull in. After that, the following turn, we'll equip a Thopter with the Batterskull, and that should be that. Alternatively, I can Magus of the Moon plus Batterskull as well to take my opponent off of casting true colorless cards as well as off of porting me. What punishes me if I Magus and Batterskull? I would chump block. A big endless one would be problematic. But just completely knocking them off of colorless mana is probably really good. It means we can't keep bouncing P and K, but that might be fine. I'll go ahead and Magus. Let's just take them off of the highest number of cards that they can play here. Yeah. All is dust would be annoying. But all is dust is going to be pretty bad for us no matter what. We'll go ahead and jump here. So now we can equip the Batterskull to the Stoneforge, and then the Stoneforge has 6 toughness, so Oblivion Sower can't actually attack into it, which is pretty sweet. It will also gain us a good amount of life, and then we have this follow-up Ether Vial play as well, and then in the following turns we can just create an army with P and K. If my opponent all is dust, I'll still be at a healthy-ish life total, and I can P and K after that. Alright, my opponent scoops it up. Alright, so we played against Eldrazi. So we essentially won game 1 with Mana Denial, we won game 2 with P and K to beat Chalice on 1 and Chalice on 2, which is sort of a tricky spot to get out of. So now we are 2-2 in this league. Let's see if we can go ahead and redeem this one and do a little bit better than breaking even. So far in this league, we played against Big Eldrazi twice, Checkpile, and Eldrazi. Not necessarily the most diverse set of pairings there. Alright. I would like to play first. Yes, we are playing against Meepsy. M-E-E-P-S-I-E, Meepsy. No data on this player. Ooh, neat. The bot tells me that my opponent is double queuing and playing in the casual room as well. This hand is a little bit weak. I am on the play and it has a Mom with a Wasteland as a follow-up, but if Wasteland or Mom isn't good against my opponent, we might have an awkward time, but I'm going to go ahead and keep this one. Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and turn the Moto sounds down like 50% here. Alright, so this Wasteland is probably not going to be great against our opponent, which means we don't have a good turn 2 follow-up play, which is unfortunate. What changes would I make in an Eldrazi heavy meta? Honestly, ooh. Palace Jailer's an okay draw. I guess I'll play a fetch and aim at thinning my deck a little bit. In an Eldrazi heavy meta, I'd be playing the red-white deck because it has Blood Moon in the first place. Like, I have Blood Moon, I have Palace Jailer, I have P and K, I have 3 Path to Exiles in the sideboard. I have a lot of tools for that matchup, more than regular D&T already does. But if I was going to, like, really want to hose that deck, I'd play a bunch of Thalia Heretic Cathar. It's a beating on almost every card that is in their deck. Mangara's fine. Alright, we are playing against Miracles. So chat, my opponent doesn't have white yet. So this might be really good. Ooh. It resolves. It's uncounterable, so of course it was going to. If my opponent doesn't have a natural white source, we might have just kind of, oops, accidentally locked them out of the game, even though Magus isn't a great card against Miracles. Of note, this does temporarily shut off our Cavern of Souls. Ooh. So my opponent probably sequenced their cantrips poorly here. If they can't fetch, they probably want to brainstorm first and then ponder so that they can shuffle away the bad cards. Now they're stuck with whatever is on the top of their deck, which is maybe mountains. Even though my opponent doesn't have a white source right now, I'm not going to get aggressive and attacking with this pump. Oh yeah, that play was sick. My opponent has a force, they can force this. I'm okay with that. They don't. Everything's going very well here. So my opponent is likely going to have to, like, use Search for Azcanta to scry one of the bad cards off now. The Scarab God. Folks, we are not playing against Miracles. We are not playing against Miracles. I repeat, there is a Scarab God in the graveyard. Chat, what has Scarab God that is in Legacy? Legit question. Is our opponent just on some sort of, like, blue-black control brew? I don't know. Okay. Nick Fit with Search for Azcanta? And 2 islands? Yeah, we are in the 2-2 bracket. Anything can happen. I agree. My setup is lagging pretty badly here. There we go. Non-zero chance my opponent's deck contains Kiora, the Crashing Wave. There's Cabal Therapy. Is it Nick Fit? Is this blue Nick Fit? I don't really know how I'm going to sideboard for this deck. I think I'm just going to overrun my opponent with little creatures here. Alright, my opponent has turned their Scry Machine into a mountain. Alright, it is Nick Fit. So my opponent is probably on Bug Nick Fit. If you'd like to use this ability, I'll get a Plains. So we're still in game one, and my opponent cast named Council's Judgment with their Cabal Therapy. That's interesting. My opponent might be kind of confused about what I'm doing since I have this Magus of the Moon. This could be anything, chat. Literal anything. What does this card do? Alright, this card does a lot of things. We're gonna kill that card. Alright, target opponent exiles cards from the top of his library until he or she exiles a non-land card. Until the end of turn, you may cast that card without playing its converted mana cost. Okay. Stoneforge Mystic. You bet. Yeah, you're right. I should take a snip of Nicol Bolas Godpharaoh in Legacy while I'm thinking about it. Alright, so we have 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We can send 9 power at Nicol Bolas Godpharaoh, luckily. So how much power am I showing? 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. If I play Batterskull, then I am showing lethal damage next turn. Or I can Flicker Wisp and do any number of things with that. I can flicker out one of their lands, which I think is what I want to do. So 1, 2, 3. So I think I'm going to Flicker Wisp a Flicker Wisp, and then Flicker Wisp the opponent's green source so I can't get Pernicious Deeded. Yeah, nice chatting with you, Bentley. So it's sort of comforting that my opponent didn't have anything to cast without that forest. So we have 3, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. We have 13 damage coming in now. Which is sort of unfortunate because things could happen. Yes, I think that is 100% reasonable. So the good thing here is that if my opponent has Deed, I can bounce this Batterskull. So that's why I'm not going to deploy these little things that could get deeded. Alright, opponent did not have Deed. Alright, so we are on red, white, D&T. Our opponent is on I'll just call it Nick Fit for my records. But it's a weird one. So we win with essentially Magus and Palace Jailer. And we beat Nicol Bolas, God Pharaoh. Now we have to decide how we want to sideboard against this mess of a deck. Blue Nick Fit playing standard cards. Yep. Alright. So I'm bringing these Cataclysms. They'll be great. Mirran Crusader's probably great against a lot of what they have going on. Relic Warder can snipe a Search for Azcanta or a Pernicious Deed. We'll bring in Rest in Peace because it shuts off sort of the Cabal Therapy, Search for Azcanta, Veteran Explorer side of their deck. And we can consider Path to Exile and P and K as well, although those cards are somewhat mediocre. Alright, what do we want to get rid of? Nick Fit is one of the only matchups where I board out Aether Vial. I'm going to assume that my opponent has Pernicious Deed in their deck, even though we didn't see it. I think that is a very, very safe assumption. I don't know why they play that pile of cards and Nicol Bolas God Pharaoh unless they are. What else should go? What else isn't going to be good? Well, Magus of the Moon was good at the beginning of that match. I don't think it'll be good on the draw, or good now that Surprise is out. I didn't actually see any creatures that mattered from my opponent other than the Deathrite Shaman, so maybe these Path to Exiles are a little bit aggressive. And then I need to cut 2 cards. Yes, I agree. That is flavorful. All right, 2 cards, 2 cards. Jete maybe isn't the best card here. No, I'll trim a Mom. Trimming a Mom's fine. Mom's not, like, going to be amazing against his deck, more or less, no matter what. Alright, this is a really good hand. So this has a removal spell if my opponent has a turn 1 Deathrite Shaman or Veteran Explorer. It has a Rest in Peace as a follow-up and a Stoneforge as well. Pretty happy with this. Alright, my opponent goes Island, pass. So I'll go, Plateau, pass. Yes, we have Rip for Scarab God. Not irrelevant. My opponent managed to squeeze Ponder in this deck. Look at them go. Look at them pondering for who knows what. My opponent's mana is probably really awkward if they're trying to, like, cast Nicol Bolas, God Pharaoh, and play a bunch of basics. Cabal Therapy resolves. They whiff on the Thalia. They indeed do masquerade as a Miracles deck. I was quite confused about what they were doing. I can't lie to you. Okay, so I can Stoneforge to, like, get ahead and build a board presence here, but I think I just want to Rest in Peace so that, like, no matter what, my opponent can't Veteran Explorer and just pull 2 lands out of their deck. I think that is worth 1 turn of tempo, because they have the Cabal Therapy in their yard, so if they have Veteran Explorer in their hand, they will be able to sacrifice that before I can remove it with the Swords to Plowshares. Goblin Lackey, I'm guessing they have 1 red source in their deck and Deathrite Shaman to cast that. If I were to venture a guess. Alright, my opponent has a 1/2 creature. Is there anything I want badly enough that I will Recruiter for it right now? My opponent is stuck on 2 lands. Thalia seems pretty sweet. Recap of the previous match. Well, my opponent is playing the Scarab God as well as Nicol Bolas God Pharaoh in their deck. And I'm going to put this on Artificer so that if I draw P and K, I can cast that, and it'll make both of my Stoneforges uncounterable in case my opponent has counter magic too. So I'll take another look at this, but I think I just want Thalia since my opponent missed a land drop there. Yes, I just want Thalia. Oh yeah, the whole round before that was pretty ridiculous. Goblin Lackey, thanks for reporting in about that. Alright, so my opponent has a couple more lands now. We have a Thalia. Now we can take our time here and ride some equipment to victory pretty easily. Yeah, there could be literally anything in my opponent's deck. Literal anything at this point. Who knows? Do I want a basic for any reason? I don't think there's any reason I want a basic since the Maguses have been boarded out and my opponent might decay this Rest in Peace and then make me fetch out some basics with Path to Exile or Veteran Explorer. So we'll go ahead and get the Plateau. We will get an uncounterable Stoneforge Mystic here. And then we're just going to plan on porting my opponent out of this game. What do I want to port my opponent off of? Probably this Bayou. I say probably because I don't really know what's going on that other side of the table. So we could get aggressive and start attacking with this Thalia and the sword this turn. But I think we're in such good shape that we can just Stoneforge in a piece of equipment and continue to port them. And doing it this way, we'll play around like an Abrupt Decay on this, or some amount of removal on the sword, not necessarily Abrupt Decay. I also might just put in Batterskull first, honestly. Sure, you can pay 2 mana for that Brainstorm. You betcha. So now I have to think about whether I want to put in the Batterskull or whether or not I want to put in the Sword of Fire and Ice. Both are the same amount of damage. I'll put in the Batterskull. Depending on what I draw, I might decide to just kind of go all in and get real aggressive with both Batterskull and the sword this turn. I draw a port. So now I will just keep attacking my opponent for 6 and double port to them. Nick Fit players are indeed a special bunch. So we have sort of 1 extra mana here, so we'll play the Mom. Start by tapping that Bayou. And my opponent has given up. They have thrown in the towel. Alright. So game 2 there, we were on the draw, and we win. We didn't really do anything too impressive that game. You know, not like winning through Nicol Bolas Godpharaoh in the previous game or anything like that. But we essentially won with Athalia and 2 ports. Our opponent stumbled a little bit on mana there. Yeah, double port, A+. Like, we had so many amazing draws. Like, Port was great, Wasteland was great. Yeah, any other disruptive element like Rin Wingmare as well, or a Phyrexian Revoker would have been amazing. Alright, so we ended up with that league 3-2, despite having a bit of a rocky start. I'm going to go ahead and stop streaming for the moment to make dinner and just sort of relax for a little while. It is my intention to do another stream after dinner, If you're interested in that, go ahead and click that like follow button or whatever and follow this channel so that you can get notifications when I go live. Thank you very much for watching me play this afternoon. It was nice to have a afternoon stream for a change. This won't happen very frequently because I work like a normal human being, but I got a day off of work today because it was so cold. So thank you very much, and I'll see many of you later tonight.